the opinion polls? Or why did the cheering stop? Cheering for Jesus is easy. But when he goes where we don't want to go, only a few will still follow while the rest shout, "Crucify." Public opinion polls reveal some strange things about the opinions of the mass population. The current focus on how women are treated in the federal parliament seems to have the Prime Minister struggling a little bit. As someone expressed it, I got this on a Facebook post. The Prime Minister is now sorry that he forgot to be sorry so shortly after he said he was sorry, and also now promises to definitely listen, unlike yesterday when he said he was listening but immediately started shouting instead. In fairness, it's a lot to remember. So how do the opinion polls play out on this one? And is the reaction that we get here to such an issue in Australian politics different to what you see in US politics? Or are we seeing a groundswell moment when the tide of public opinion may move things in a new direction? The analysts on either side are having a field day. You can read all kinds of commentary on what's happening on this issue. And it puts me in mind of when people expressed an opinion which didn't quite pan out. Again, I'm helped by one of my correspondents who sends me stuff during the week to remember some of the things that some people thought were going to happen and didn't quite pan out that way. Number one, it's actually, I'm choosing only 10 of the 25 examples. Albert Einstein. There's not the slightest indication that nuclear energy will ever be obtainable. It would mean that the atom would have to be shattered at will. And he was a brainy man, but he got that wrong. What about this next one? The Beatles. Guitar music's on the way out. Tony, could you please take note of that? Okay. Telephones. Yes. Even better, computers. Or if you've been to the hospital lately, X-rays. And if you drove to church this morning, instead of riding your horse, what about television? Computers, again, you computer lovers. (1977). Wow. Or copying machines. Xerox must have had a field day. And of course, we can finish with telephones again. Yes. Public opinion, opinions of the experts even. I wonder what we could say about Jesus on Palm Sunday. Could we trust the opinion makers and the opinion pollsters of his day? Hail Jesus, who people expected to be a militaristic political king who will destroy the Romans and take charge of our nation. How tremendously lonely it must have been for Jesus that day. He was surrounded by people who had absolutely no idea who he was or why he came. These were people completely consumed by their own desire for who they wanted him to be, rather than true disciples. He knew full well that these were the same people who would turn against him at his trial before Pilate when they found that he didn't meet his expectations. As some wise philosopher once said, today's rooster is tomorrow's feather duster. One day you're riding the crest of public opinion wave, the next day the wave is well and truly broken and you're a wipeout. Public opinion can be remarkably fickle. Just look at all the bandwagons rolling as the footy season starts. All the teams who win in the early rounds all have hordes of supporters tipping them for the flag this year. But as another wise philosopher once said, jumpeth not on the bandwagon if there's a chance that the wheels shall cometh off. The Waratahs is my rugby team and they haven't won a game yet. They're 5-0. I'm not jumping on any bandwagon with them. Public opinion is a fickle, fickle thing. On Palm Sunday, Jesus' bandwagon is well and truly rolling, and everybody wants to be on it. It's rolled through the Judean countryside for weeks and weeks, and now it's approaching the end of its journey, Jerusalem, the holy city, the seat of power, the place where the Messiah would establish himself and rid the nation of its oppressors. Jesus certainly hasn't come out and said that he's going to do that, but that's the rumour. And by now he's got enough enemies in Jerusalem that unless he's planning something pretty big, you'd reckon he'd know better than to walk in there. The public opinion is on his side. Everyone's jumping on the bandwagon. The ticker tape is raining down. The people are singing and dancing and chanting, Jesus, Jesus. Placards are held high. Palm branches are waving. People are throwing their coats in front of him. Jesus is recording the highest opinion poll rating ever, knocking off even sliced bread, automatic dishwashers, bananas in pyjamas. Jesus is right up there at the top. But public opinion is a fickle, fickle thing. As we'll hear again on Friday, just a few days later, the cry of the crowd has become a snarling call for blood. Crucify him, crucify him, crucify him. How could they be so fickle? How could they call for him to be crowned one day and crucified the next? Enthroned one day and electric chaired the next? Who are these people? And how could they abandon him so easily? Well, we could go into all sorts of explanations about failed expectations, about how they had a certain sort of image in their minds, about what sort of a Messiah they wanted and how they weren't prepared to accept the Messiah on different terms. We could go into details about the complex power play that was going on and the way public opinion was being manipulated. We could talk about the psychology of crowd behaviour and how people get swept along in a mob mentality and do things that they would never do on their own if they had time to think about it. We could explore all these things and more, and all of them would yield valuable information. All of them would contribute to our knowledge of what happened back then and how and why. But as illuminating as it might be, I don't think we need to do that. If we really want to understand how these people could sing Jesus' praises one day and call for his death the next, I don't think we need to look any further than ourselves. The contents of our own hearts and the quality of our own behaviour. You see, my guess is that most of you are not that different from me, and I know a little of what I'm capable of. I know that I can stand here and sing praises to Jesus one day walk by on the other side of the road as he lies in the gutter on the next. I know that I can be lost in wonder and praise at the gracious mercy of God one day, and then turn around and make the most callous judgment the next day about someone, just writing them off, rejecting them entirely without showing any sign of the grace that I've been shown and how it's beginning to rub off on me. I know that some days I can be here and sing, brother, sister, let me serve you. Let me be as Christ to you. And then walk out thinking, shit, you are lucky to have me as your minister. But I don't think I'm alone. It's easy to cheer for Jesus, to wave palm branches and to sing praises in the gathered assembly. It's not difficult to join in the singing here each Sunday morning and honour Jesus as Messiah and King of the universe, but there's a lot more to following Jesus than just cheering from the sidelines. What do those praises mean when you're behind closed doors and away from the public eye? You can sing in here, I want you more than gold and silver. But how do those words affect you when you get to work and love and justice don't turn a profit or put you in line for promotion? Do you honour him with your actions or capitulate and crucify him? What do the words of commitment mean when it comes to working out how you commit your time and your money? What do those words mean when you find yourself in a group of sophisticated and successful people who are discussing what a loser and a fraud Jesus was and how his followers have only ever caused misery and bigotry in the world? Do you praise him with your lips or crucify him with your compliant silence? How could the crowds be so fickle? How could they cheer for Jesus one day and call for his blood the next? Perhaps they were just like us. I may have told this story before of being in a youth event where we were being challenged to follow Jesus with our whole lives, even to the point of entering full-time ministry. And when we were asked how many of us were definitely committed to going into the ministry, only one person raised their hands. Not me, it wasn't me. One young woman spoke up and asked that question, made the comment, I have a problem with your use of the word commitment. That sounds very binding and restrictive. In some places, the church of today has become an institution in which even belief in God is optional or peripheral. And if you think that I'm joking about that, I can tell you that I came across an article when we were living in Europe about the fact that there were many churches in Europe that now have ministers that don't believe in God. And I didn't believe it, but I began to do some research on it and found that there was some truth apparently to this article, that there are now ministers in Europe in churches who no longer believe in God. God has become optional or peripheral. Marketing techniques have replaced response to the gospel of Jesus as the means of membership enlistment. The basic appeal is to self-defined needs rather than a call to radical discipleship. The church's mission all too often is to meet its members' perceived needs rather than to serve God's need for a redeemed, reconciled and healed world. You might think that after 2,000 years, we as the church, the followers of Jesus, would have learned a few things. You might think that the church, particularly its leaders, would have learned something about about commitment, about following the Christ, about the importance of discipleship. Instead, we have so many similarities to the churches that Jesus met when he inspected Jerusalem or the synagogues. The question is asked, what can the church, what can God do for me? Rather than, how is it I can serve God through my church? How can I become a better disciple? Discipleship means knowing who Jesus Christ is and following, even if it might lead to a cross. And I'd suggest to you that this is when the cheering stopped. The cheering stopped when Jesus began to talk more about a cross. In the early part of his ministry, Jesus talked a lot about the kingdom of God. People wanted to hear about that, especially since they misunderstood this kingdom to be a restoration of all of Israel's fortunes and King David's glory days. But increasingly, Jesus began to talk about sacrifice, even giving up your life. That's not nearly as popular. Not then, not now. How could the crowds be so fickle? How could they cheer for Jesus one day and call for his blood the next? Perhaps they were just like us. It's a sobering realization, but don't despair. This is not the end of the story. On Thursday night, we'll pick up the story again and follow what happens to Jesus and to people just like us. We'll hear of him kneeling at the feet of people just like us and washing our feet and promising that we'll be a part of him. And on Friday, we'll look in horror at the extent of what people just like us can do, and we'll hear him say for us, Father, forgive them. They don't know what they're doing. And by Sunday, well, who knows what we might become. People of God, I invite you to this Holy Week to remember that the reason that we are here, the purpose that God gives us in our lives, the depth of our commitment to God, and his commitment to us. I began with the question, why did the cheering stop? It stopped because Jesus more and more began to talk about commitment. It stopped because Jesus opened up the doors of the church and invited people to come in. It stopped because people realized Jesus meant everything he said. That whole pick up your cross and follow me thing, yeah, he really meant it. And then he went and did it. We sing the beautiful Palm Sunday song. When his time was over, the palms lay bare.